Here, and I'm handing over the microphone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Melanie. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Antonia, and yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I really have to say it's so cool that Melanie, you together with Alex and the whole ETH AI Center set up this lecture. When I was a student, I wish there would have been more lectures like that, like a little bit more practical, but also much more on entrepreneurship and actually on how to finally venture out. So really, really cool that you're setting this up. And case retail investors, and I thought I'd just put a little bit of material together, some things that yeah would have helped me when I was a founder, that I would have found useful to know before I would have gone out to raise. And yeah, but let's do this a little bit collaborative. So maybe at the end we can just also take a little bit of time for questions and then open it up. So I make sure I answer everything that's on your mind. And yes, so if it's fine for you, I would just kick off. I have to say the scenery is so nice with the fog. I'm blown away. Like you don't even see out there. Yeah. It's really beautiful. Okay. Do I click here?
Yes.
Wonderful. So as Melanie already said, I'm with Founderful, and maybe just a couple of words about us as a fund. We're a team of 8 people here in Zurich, and everyone that works at Founderful has been a founder or an operator before. That's also the reason why I joined the fund 3 years ago. When I was a founder, I always wanted and really was looking to work with investors that have done the founder journey before, because the conversation in the boardroom was just completely different than people with a pure PE background or something like that. So that was really the primary reason why I joined the fund. So we are a team of 8 people. The fund was originally started 2018 by Pascal. He also worked, he also studied at ETH. He founded a company called Get Your Guide, the Swiss travel unicorn. And together with Lucas, who founded ETH and sold the company to Just Eat, the online delivery platform, and Alex Stöckel, they started the fund really with the mission to invest in the best Swiss founders. And our strategy is very simple. We invest in the very first financing round, always as a lead investor. So that means with the largest ticket in the round, because we say either we have full conviction about a topic and a team or we don't. And then we work very closely with the whole founding team, because we really enjoy it, in order to scale a sustainable company and to raise the most successful next round of financing. We invest as a generalist VC, so that means we really look at every topic. We focus on deep tech, so we also do invest in hardware and B2B SaaS primarily. But again, we look at every topic. And the reason why I joined is because I knew Pascal, who founded Get Your Guide from before, because his co-founder and still CEO of Get Your Guide, Johannes Reck, was my very first angel investor, my first board member, and he really taught me everything about how to raise from investors, how to do a board meeting, how to hire people, how to scale a company. And that's how I knew him, and that's why when I then, after 8 years of scaling my own business, when I went out, I thought it was really cool what he's building, and so I joined them. And yeah, so maybe as a first temperature check, Melanie told me that this is a very ambitious and entrepreneurial group of people. So maybe just for me to know, who of you wants to found a company at some point? Okay, wow. You didn't raise your hand because you're already founding a company? Okay, who is already doing a startup? Okay, very cool. You were right. That's really awesome to know. And yeah, so basically, I don't want to bore you. I just maybe wanted to be a little bit helpful. So I'm going to share some of my experiences, and then if you have any questions at the end, let's open this up. So in my experience, a good fundraising process, because Melanie asked me to share some words about fundraising, takes between 3 to 6 months, and that is from start until the money is on your bank account. It can be engineered, and I mean, most of you have an engineering background, so I think that's also like good news. And it's both an art and a science. And what do I mean by that? That actually there's a lot you can do to influence a positive outcome if you structure it well. And when I raised my first like round of funding, I was all over the place. Like I didn't know how to do it left and right, and it took me a long time to actually raise the first round. And that's why I just want to share some of my experience. As Melanie said, before I joined Founderful 3 years ago, I lived the last 10 years in Berlin. I founded my own company called Careship. We're providing senior care all over Germany until today. And I work with many VCs in Germany, in Europe, like Creandum. I heard Melanie already shared also like best practices from Creandum. It's a European fund based in Stockholm. And they have really cool material online on like what a pitch deck looks like, also like what a financing plan looks like, how much to pay yourself as a founder. They produce really cool content and it's an incredible fund. So check them out. I also raised from US investors like Spark Capital based in Boston. And so yeah, I'm just going to share some advice. So basically, if I think about a good fundraising process, I would think about 4 stages. And these are also like really the things that you can influence. It seems a little bit obvious, but I'm still going to go through them. Number 1, preparation. So you really can do a lot before you go out and actually approach investors, by just being very well prepared. What do I mean by that? Like, obviously, you should have a pitch deck. A good pitch deck has between 10 to 12 pages, like not 50, not 70, not 100, like really 10 pages that are very crisp and very clear. And it's always easy like to put a lot on your slides, and it's always very difficult to really minimize and try to stay lean. So it takes some time to build a good pitch deck. And this template, for instance, from Creandum is actually very good. Then you should get your data room ready. What does that mean? Like, so you put in a financial plan, like I always suggest, put in something between like 3 to 5 years. Like every investor knows your first financial plan is really just a little bit of a projection into the future. You don't know the outcome, but it gives a peek into how you see the world and what your ambition is. So no matter like this, your financial plan will change a gazillion times, and everyone knows that. But not having one where you can at least share your thoughts of how you think for the next 5 years really means that, like you're not that well prepared. Now, what else could you put in your data room that could convince investors that you actually know what you're doing? So it's a good product demo. And a good product demo is also like what we see or what I see today every day. Like a good product demo is like a video format kind of thing where you share like in a precise version, like not 10 minutes, not 20 minutes, but like 2 to 5 minutes, what it is about. Like that you can send to investors, that they can a bit like play around with, because it's just very useful to like open your world to them. Also, what's to be not underestimated is customer references. Like put in a doc, and most founders don't do that, where what you want to avoid as a founder, that every investor wants to talk to the very few customers that you might already have. So just like put an FAQ where you maybe interview some of your customers and just answer some questions. Why do they use your product? What do they like most about it? Would they use it in the future? What's the biggest challenge? Like just give them some reading materials. And then also what you can do in terms of preparation, like how you can really influence. And that's why I say fundraising is both a science and an art, because like you can influence it, is how you prep your pitch. Like really prep it, like run through it. Like make sure you're precise, you're to the point. like you can guide someone through your 10 pages and just prep that. Secondly, sourcing. So the second process in a good fundraising, or the second step in a good fundraising process, is your sourcing skills. What does that mean? So there are a gazillion of VCs out there, and for me as a founder, it was always very hard to actually understand what each of them is actually focusing on. Like, where do they invest? How much do they invest? What role do they play? Do they lead? Do they co-lead? Do they just follow? And what's their sweet spot? Like, what is really the ticket size that they feel comfortable with? What other startups did they invest in your domain, in a similar space, in something that really excites you? And what you can prep there is you can do your research. Now, we have funds that just like send out like, a bulk email, like dear sir or madam kind of format, which will lead to nowhere, right? So like the more time you put into your shortlist, which is which is cumbersome, the higher the outcome. So we have, founders that write us from, I don't know, like all over the world, in a bulk email, like, let's invest in my company in the US. Like, if you just click once on our website, we only invest in Swiss companies. So there is like, the more you personalize, where you say, hey, even to a point, I had the most success when I pitched to investors, when I really like targeted a specific person in a specific fund, looked at what they invested into the future and into the past, and then could draw a link. My biggest challenge always was with senior care and investors, it's a very personal topic. And someone would listen if they had an experience with an elderly person becoming care dependent. Now, that's super hard to read about, right? Like, if we now have a company that does plastic recycling, they can do a very good shortlist of investors that in the past have invested in plastic recycling startups. I had to like really find out in a conversation, does this topic resonate to someone? Because for me, it was rather binary. Either someone told me, senior care, like, why don't you do funerals? Like, I'm really not interested. Like, that's really the feedback I got. Or they said, hey, one of my parents just was in a similar situation. I couldn't find a caregiver. It actually interests me. And so, for example, one of my investors was Creandum, and Creandum was the hardest investor to get on board. And I worked with Fredrik Kassel. He's one of the general partners. He's an incredible person. He did the Spotify deal. And how I got him to invest was that I looked into his past and I realized that he drove all the healthcare investment deals at Creandum. He invested into primary care, which is now a unicorn startup called Kry out of Stockholm. Like, they provide telemedicine. He invested in specialized care, which was a diabetes type 1 startup in the US. And I built up a thesis that, okay, he invested in primary care, he invested in specialized care, but the pillar that is missing is elderly care. So my conversation with him was incredible because he had a very strong thesis on this whole care market. And if I had talked to another partner at Creandum, like, they would have not have this, notion. So I'm just saying sourcing is really hard because it's incredibly cumbersome. But the more time you put into it by really looking, hey, when one of our portfolio companies that's fundraising now in the wastewater treatment space, if someone already invested in water tech, their chance of getting this person interested is much higher by saying, hey, Peter, I saw you invested in blah, blah, blah. We are building now this. Actually, would you have time to jump on a call? It's a complete different message than being like, dear sir or madam, we are raising, let's hop on a call. So I'm just saying, it is cumbersome, but the fruits really pay off. Lastly, pitch. So there's a huge difference how long your fundraising process takes, between 3 months or everything 9 months plus and forever. So some startups are always raising, right? Which is bad, because when you're always raising, you don't have momentum. So what you want to do is you want to think, okay, when do I start fundraising? Then you want to prep, like your preparation, your sourcing, your shortlist. And if you go out and pitch, you want to say, hey, I go out in Q2 2025 and I'm going to start in week, I don't know, 14. And you're going to send out all your shortlist emails on the same day. And you really try for the next like 3 to 4 weeks to put all your VC calls within that time frame. And that gets you into a dynamic where you are super pumped, like you build up momentum, like you really, and people can feel that, like your energy is very different. And also, it creates a lot of momentum because VCs talk a lot. So we have these founders that whenever I reach out to them, they're always raising. And then I'm like, okay, you know, they didn't get the round in the first place, like no one still signed, something is still open, I can wait, I have absolutely no like pressure to run. So our good founders, like the most successful founders in our portfolio, ETH AI, or Grape Insurance, that also now got like tier 1 funds in, they really had a very engineered process where we had a Tuesday with a date where we went out. We didn't differentiate between VCs. Some founders think, in the first wave, I only target like tier 3 funds because I want to practice. Then I go into tier 2 and then I go into tier 1. No, do it all at the same time, because otherwise you become like kind of like an old shoe and then no one like is really excited to talk to you.
Can you maybe say what tier 1 and tier 3
for those? So if you think about your short list, you would probably, if you put together a good list of investors, you will very quickly realize that your energy is different with a couple of funds, right? Like there are, and this is what we call tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So it's basically the fit of the fund depending on your business, which correlates to the brand of the fund, which correlates to how successful the fund was in the past, which correlates to, like, if you think about, you go out with a press release that you just raised your 2 million round, like if you have Sequoia on there, like your value will increase versus you have, oh, my uncle that lives in Singapore, like put in 2 million because he is just, like, it's basically how well known the fund is, depending on the investments they did in the past, their success rate, and how well they fit to you. So it doesn't mean that Sequoia is the best fund for everyone. It means that if you are in a B2B software space, then Sequoia is probably one of the tier 1 funds that ideally, next to Andreessen Horowitz and Index and yada yada, you want to, like, you prefer versus, I don't know, as I said, like some kind of unknown PE firm sitting in the middle of nowhere. And then close. So closing is the last part, which is not to be underestimated, because now here's where the art part comes in. Like you have to create momentum, and I will come back on that later, because I also have some thoughts on that. Now, when I was fundraising, at some point, I founded my company with my brother. He also studied at ETH, and at some point, we turned it a little bit around and we asked ourselves, hey, what do we actually care about when we speak to funds? Like, who do we want to work with? And that's how we put our sourcing list together. So this is super old, like 6 years old, but at some point I put together like our caring codex and what I look for when I talk to investors. So what I look for, and this is how you could think about your sourcing strategy, 5 categories. Number 1, facts. What's the focus of the fund? Like stage, geography, industry. What's the fund structure? Like what's the fund size? Like what's the fund stage? This means like you know, if you're raising like a 1 million round, like you can easily work with, you know, funds that are just starting out. But if you're raising like 60 million, like you want to have someone that has done it before, right? Number 3, like portfolio companies. Who else did they work with in the past? Like call one of the founders up, speak to them and ask, like, how is it to work with them? Now, sometimes I have founders that I talk to, and then they say, hey, you know what? I saw that Founderful invested in ETH AI. Actually, I just spoke with Julian, the founder, and he told me you were super helpful in raising their next round, and it's actually very cool to work with you. And for me, that's like, oh wow, like he looked into what we're doing. He reached out to one of the founders. He actually got a reference call that a check on us, and he liked what we're doing. Obviously, it could also be negative, but like it showed that he cared, because Melanie mentioned, like, I'm really into this human to human side of business. Like fundraising is really a human to human process. You have to show that you care. And purpose. Why is the fund doing what they're doing? Like if you are in climate tech or clean tech, like is the fund a clean tech, climate tech fund that really cares about like increasing or like taking carbon out of the atmosphere, or you can really tailor your pitch. Number two, who is the team in the fund? Like who is the partner on your deal? Who is the partner you talk to? What's the background? Like how do you tailor how you talk to them? Who are the other partners? Like for me, I always check out, is anyone in that fund an entrepreneur? Like did anyone in this fund like start a company? Because for me, the conversation was really, really different than just someone with a pure McKinsey PE background that now talks to me about KPIs in 2031. And I'm like it was a completely different discussion. Three, what impact can they create and what do they bring to the table? Like if I'm in healthcare, I want to work with a healthcare fund that really can make me introductions in that space. Ideally, if I can choose, right? But this whole point of fundraising is you don't want to work with anyone. You want to put yourself in a position of strength where you can choose your investor, which is super hard, but the more effort you put in, the more likely. Four, cultural fit. Like how do they talk to you? Do you have a shared values, shared vision, shared passion? Like the moment you put someone onto your cap table, this person is there until the end of your company, which means ideally until your exit or IPO, or until maybe it also doesn't work out, but you don't get rid of anyone on your cap table easily. It's very expensive, right? So really think about who are the people, like do they care? And this is like my last point. I always look at, do they actually care? Like, do they just want to invest because they reach out because they heard we're raising and now get a lot of FOMO, and then like they also want to get into the deal? Or do they really care about elderly care and like decreasing loneliness all over Europe? And now maybe you have a company where you're like, hey, to be honest, I don't mind. I just want to scale this, sell it, and become very rich. Then maybe you don't care about your investors. But most of the cases, you know you're passionate about your topic. Maybe you did your PhD in it. Maybe you already worked for it for 2 years. Like you care, right? And you want other people to care as well. So now how to raise, because that's what Melanie asked me to actually cover, is with that, I
wanted to ask, because we as founders get this information. VCs also know we're looking for VCs that check all those boxes. So I'm wondering if there's a way to actually get some other signal that really tells us a VC cares, because of course if a VC sees money, they want to invest and they want to seem like they care. Yeah. So I don't know if there's a way to have.
Yeah, and that's a difficult part, because for me, when I was a founder, when I clicked on all these websites of the VCs, they all look the same. Like I couldn't even read it anymore. They all like are founder friendly, like backing the biggest technology companies in Europe, blah blah blah. And like it's like one was red, one was black, one was yellow. But that's why I really say it's really a human to human process. You have to get to know the people that work there, which is the hardest part, because you have to build a relationship. And for me, the earlier I built that relationship, the more I understood about the fund, their DNA, because teams are very different, and what they care about. So my strategy was always like, I always really tried to build connections. And then at some point I was like, oh, this fund is like really not how I roll. Like they are just very different in the way we operate. Ideally, I would not want to work with them because they're super like, I don't know, ego driven, like very, just like elbowish, like very aggressive. Like I prefer to work with people where I can like really have an incredible conversation with. Now, how do you know that? Not by looking at the website, because they all look the same. So that's why you really have to put effort in it to build a relationship and get to know the people behind that, which is the hardest part. But that's why you can engineer a lot by just speaking to people and that's why I always say, if you have a founding team, it's wonderful, we don't invest in solo founders. Why? Now, they can be very successful, right? But like, for instance, Get Your Guide, they built the company with 5 people. And we have this thesis where it's so hard to build a startup in the first place, right? I mean, you compete against so many things, and luck is not on your side because you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, you don't have the money, you don't have like a big enough team always. You're always behind, kind of. And so on the more shoulders you can divide kind of like the same buy-in, like really people that want to go full steam, the better. And in my opinion, fundraising, like if you have, I mean, at some point you have to divide titles in the team. It's not about titles, but it's about responsibilities. And the CEO of a startup has 3 tasks. Number 1 is fundraising. So the best CEOs, like Johannes Reck, the CEO of Get Your Guide, he built $1 billion company. Since 12 years, he's the founder CEO of that company, like more than 1,000 employees, very successful. And his number 1 job still today, and he's an incredible fundraiser, is to build connections with VCs for the future. And he's brilliant at that. Like he taught me everything. It's really about like you meet in person, you go for a coffee, you go for a lunch, you go for a dinner, like you really try to get to know people. And that's his primary job. Secondly, hiring. He's still responsible to get in like tier 1 talent into the company. How do you get like the superstar from Tesla from San Francisco to move into your company? By building relationships. You go there, you meet, you wine and dine. Number 3, investor relations, fundraising. Like number 3 is still like when you move from management to leadership by really enabling your team to be at their best. It's not top-down management. It's basically like bringing everyone with you. Those are like the 3 tasks. So if you're a solo founder, all of that is just much more difficult because you also have to scale the tech. You also have to sell the product. You have to do so many things. And in my opinion, like if I were to found a company again, for me, really, I would get a team together. It's the most important decision you take as an entrepreneur. It's like who you work with. So think about it wisely. And there's a brilliant tool online. It's called the 50 co-founder questions to ask. Probably many of you know it. I saw some nods there. It's really good. And get a team together, divide the task on a couple of shoulders. And it's also much more fun because being a founder is very lonely. Because at the end of the day, like you have a team that you always have to, you know, like you have to like go in and put on the lights. You have to leave and put off the lights. Like it's really what you bring in, the energy that mirrors back on how your company operates. Like you have to attract investors. You have to keep your current investors happy. Investor relations is a full-time job alone, if you think about it. You have to hire the best people. You have to build your brand. You have to, so like, it's more fun if you can also like go through the hard parts with someone together that you trust. So how to raise, can I take the questions later? Or
it's a quick one.
Yeah.
You said, you know, there were like 1 solo founders, but would you say there's an optimal number of people in the first founding as founders? Like what is the optimal number?
That's very hard to answer because it really depends on your business. I would think about it that way that like I would look at, hey, do you have someone that is really great at driving and scaling the technology? Do you have someone that's really great at selling what you're building? And do you have someone that's really great at like going out, speaking to investors and making sure you always have money on the bank account? Because if you don't have money on the bank account, like the other 2 things don't really matter. Now, it could be that these 3 tasks are divided. I really like you have this one person that is brilliant at all of them. It's very unlikely. It could be that these 3 tasks you can divide them for 2 people. Like, so there is no ideal number. I'm just saying, like, in the beginning, until the end, your biggest constraint is always resources. So the more people you have that have a full buy-in into what you're doing. Like, I'm a huge fan of equal share split within the founding team. Doesn't matter if someone joins like a year later, 10 months later, 2 years later. If they commit to be a co-founder, equal share split. Because otherwise, you even if you have 49%, the person having 49% has that in the back of their mind and will do 49% and always look at the person having 51%. In some cases, it makes sense. Like we have some founders that have a PhD, they worked on it for a gazillion of years, and then okay, maybe you can like justify it a little bit, but the level of motivation, the more equal share split you have, the better like you will have really an equal co-founding team. So sometimes we have a founding team where someone enters with a great background, like, I don't know, X month later, could be a year later. I tell them, look, make them an equal co-founder. You will get more out of that person if that person is co-founder quality. So there is no ideal number, but I would go for quality instead of quantity. Like it's not that if you have 10, like you're more successful. It can also complicate things, but just make sure you cover these traits. Now, how to raise? When I turn around, the question is like, okay, how do you raise now from VCs? That we could turn it around. Like, what do VCs actually look for? And why not what do VCs look for? Because it creates this like two-party system, but like, why would someone invest in your company? And so it's very like the VC decision-making process among investors, any group of investors, it's always the same. And if I were to summarize it, you can basically say, very simply put, people want to invest in something that solves a problem that someone is willing to pay for. And now if you attract VCs always want to have this problem being very big. What does big mean? Ideally, you are operating in a domain where at some point, at least you have the potential to create 100 million in annual recurring revenue. Now, what is this stupid number? It is a little bit of a stupid number because obviously you can be a very successful company if you ever achieve 50 million, 10 million, like great. But VCs, if you want to attract this class of investors, because I think Melanie shared that it's not the only way by far. Like you can have a great business idea and just stay a little bit smaller, leaner, find a different way. I would even say VC is a great way of funds if you have the potential, like if you really want to go fast and scale very big. Because otherwise, like once you're in this VC game, you just have to play it. So this is what VCs look for. Now, what does it mean in detail? Basically, for every investor, the decision-making process is complicated, it's full of uncertainties. And if you boil it down to one question, an investor, even an angel investor, will ask themselves, okay, there are so many risks, especially the earlier you invest, like which one of these are you comfortable to take? And what does that mean? So the VC framework is, some people say the 5 T's, just like to really simplify. People look into team, tech, TAM, which is your market, traction, and terms of the deal, right? And by understanding that, because in the beginning, I didn't really know when I was a founder, what do VCs now actually look for? You can really tailor your pitch around that. And that's, again, this like, you can engineer this process if you want. So team, what do people look for? Maybe this also answers your question, which you just asked, but basically VCs, it's not like a checklist that everyone like strictly follows, but just to give you some ideas, I just put like some bullets here. So they look at who and why them. So they look at the founder team constellation. Do they have someone in a team that can build the technology and someone that can sell? These 2 factors, sell to investors, to customers, to future hires, because you want to have the best team. Now, why them? Like, what's their motivation? Like, why would they stick through it in difficult times and not just, jump ship? Because everyone on this planet has opportunity costs, right? Like, you can easily just quit tomorrow and go to a company that pays you 5 times what you're actually making. So investors will want to see, like, what's your intrinsic motivation? Second, demanding. Like, people want to invest in founders that are highly demanding. What does that mean? Like, ambitious, they think big, like it's how they respond to emails, it's their speed of iteration, like product iteration, market iteration, like how do they move? Highly empathetic, like people need to be able to explain the product, even though it's super complicated, but most of the people you talk to have absolutely no clue about your domain, right? Like you're the expert, you have your PhD in a certain subject, but investors don't. So make it easy for them to understand, and that it requires empathy. We have founders, like if I have a call with a founder is like, if after 30 minutes, I don't understand what they're doing, like, you know, people go back and forth, have like 50 slides. It's super complicated. It's incredibly difficult to then follow, right? So just prep your pitch and make it easy. Why them? Like, is there any sort of magic that the team has that why they would win and not someone else? Now everyone is building something in the AI agent space, right? Why them? Like, do they have like a specific, do they have an amazing engineering team? Do they have like, did they innovate in this space already before? Like, why would they win now when everyone else is also like building something in that space? And then I always ask myself the question at the end of a founder call, am I excited? Would I work for them? Like, would I quit my job and join the team tomorrow? Because the best companies in our portfolio, yes, I would love to work with these founders. I get super excited in every founder interaction. Now, tech, what? So what problem are they solving? Like, explain what your technology does. Is it critical? Like, is it just a nice to have or is it a must have? How defensible is it? Do you have any sort of anything? Like, it could be an IP now if you're into software, like you don't have an IP. Is it any type of network effect? The answer could be no, which is completely fine. It's just speed and it's just execution, which then gets back to point one, the team, like how fast can you actually execute and iterate? Is it early? The early version does not have to be nice. Like, we have founders in the fundraising process, you know, they move super quickly. Like, they send us like a little Loom video, 1 minute, 2 minutes, you know, every week, where they say, hey, you know, now we tweak this, now we tweak that. It doesn't look great, like the dashboard, but like they ship something. 3, time and momentum. What does your market look like? Now, you build something that is solving a problem, and now investors will ask, how big is that problem? So they will try to get an understanding, like, are you attracting like 1 or 2 engineering teams in a big company where basically on the CEO agenda of that company, you would be the last priority? Or is it something like that's really big because people want it? Is there any momentum? Like, why now? Lastly, traction. Now, we talked about that people look at what problem you're solving, and now VCs ask themselves a very simple question: who is willing to pay for that? Because especially now in this whole AI agent space, which we really like and which we really look like into at the moment, like when we ask the founder, okay, like you're building this super great agents, blah, 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 they can do everything, but who is willing now to pay for that? So this is when traction comes in. You are super early, so no one expects, for instance, we invest pre-seed, which means pre-revenue, pre-everything. And then we write the largest check. What do we look for? We look for any first signs of customer love. It could be like you talk to these companies in the last couple of weeks, like this is your point of contact. You made this person your biggest fan. They're not just ready to sign, but if I want to talk to them, I could call them up. It could be in deep tech, like some pilots, some LOIs, anyone signaling first interest. It could be like someone that maybe pays something already for it. This would be the last stage in seed and pre-seed. But really think about any sort of customer love. And then what could be an add-on is the quality of logos you're working with. So you increase your value if you're in the manufacturing space and you're working with Siemens versus working with like any no-name company that no one has ever heard about. So for example, ETH AI, one of our portfolio companies, how did they raise? We did the very first round. They built an AI software for quality detection in manufacturing. Now, their first customer was Siemens. Not Siemens Global, but here in Zurich, they worked with one factory. And then we invested because we said, okay, they had one quality logo and Siemens. Now, we worked with them for 12 months. And within 12 months, we built up the traction part in a way where we scaled vertically. So within Siemens, we scaled from one factory to one more. And then we looked at other verticals. So we had Siemens manufacturing, and then we thought, what other verticals? Then they closed Roche in pharma. Then they closed one more in food and beverage, like Linden Sprüngli. People knew these logos, the quality of the logos. They only had 3, but people knew them. And then General Catalyst and Early Bird invested after 12 months. Then they continued, and now Index invested after 12 months. So they were really able with quality of logos. So that's what adds value to your company. That's what I'm trying to say. So the quantity doesn't matter too much as long as you are in a B2C app where you just really, really, really like go for quantity, but the quality does. And then lastly, terms. So investors also look at terms like what is the how much are you raising? Like how do you think about dilution, which is then equal to the valuation that you want? What's your timing? Like, what does your cap table look like? Be very, very careful with how you design your cap table. With that, I mean, like, just keep it lean, very lean for as long as possible. Like, only take in fully operational co-founders into your cap table. Don't have advisors, professors, and so on. Don't take in anyone that, you know, like, just really try to keep it lean. And if you look at VCs and if you have 10 offers on the table, fit is always better than terms from a founder perspective now. And with that, I mean, even though you have someone that gives you the highest valuation, if you match better with someone that maybe like gives you a lower valuation, I would always take that fund because you have to work with that person for 10 years. So again, now I'm back to the beginning that a good fundraising process takes 3 to 6 months, and it can be engineered by preparing for it. And it's both an art and a science. And by doing all that, now what's the art part? And the art part is really, in my view, and Melanie already said it from the very beginning, this human to human side. Like a VC doesn't invest on a pure financial basis, right? Like obviously they want to create returns, but ultimately there are people behind the fund and not robots. And they want to be excited about the topic. So I underestimated that. I thought, you know, a VC is a VC. And when I went out fundraising my first round, I just threw my deck to all the VCs I could compile. And my biggest learning is build good relationships. Go out, talk to people, attend events where maybe someone is that you want to get to know, like ask people for an introduction. I wrote a gazillion. I didn't have any network when I raised my first round in Berlin, and no one would still invest pre-seed back then. So I sent a gazillion of cold LinkedIn messages. I always try to tailor them. Like half of the people never replied to this date. But don't count the no's. Just really like try. If you can, obviously, warm intros are better than cold. But if you don't have the network, build it yourself. And it's really possible. Write people, like not only once, like write them 2 times, 3 times. Not only investors, like Julian, the founder of ETH AI, he called Siemens 21 times, literally, before they picked up and said, okay, we're going to meet for a coffee where you can pitch the product demo. Like, some founders expect, oh, I wrote this person already once on LinkedIn, no reply. Like, no, like go a little bit further because everyone misses a message, or like it can happen, right? Ideally not, but like it can happen. Talk to people, show that you care, like do a little bit of research. Maybe they invested in something before that you think is cool. That's the art part. And yeah, other than that, I mean, some people think or like ask, oh, is the market maybe ready yet? Like, is there still capital on the market? Like, is it a good time to raise? Yes, it's still a good time to raise. Like there are many VCs out there. Many maybe invest a tiny bit more carefully, but they still have funds and they have funds to deploy, which means they have to invest. So yes, people invest every day. So it's more about, are you ready for it? And then some founders ask, oh, like whenever they publish something on LinkedIn, like a VC reached out, should I take a call? Well, yes, do that call. But if you start, but don't fundraise just because someone reached out. Like if you make fundraising a deliberate decision where you say, I'm going to start fundraising now and make it a 3-month process. We had founders, like before we invested, that they started fundraising and then the main founder, not the main founder, but the founder that did the pitches Then he went for a 3-week trip to Nicaragua and was just unreachable. Like, that's just not so great. I mean, go to Nicaragua, but then just start fundraising after. Because be responsive, like time your pitches in the same week. It will really give you a lot of energy boost, and it will also help you. It helped me a lot you will get a lot of no's, right? For whatever reason, like someone is in a bad mood, someone doesn't get it, someone is just like not interested at the moment. And it will make it less, it made me count the no's much less, which is never personal. But if you only target 3 and you get 2 no's, it hurts a bit, probably. Yep. Now maybe some questions. What do you think, Melanie?
Yeah, amazing. Very, very insightful. You have to say that. No. I like this is why I was so this the question.
So you mentioned that VCs look at the annual recurring revenue, but what if the startup is before that stage? Like they don't have it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the tricky part, because obviously you are like, if you're raising pre-seed or a seed round, like you're always before annual recurring revenue. So that's why I said in terms of traction, like think about it. So ideally you have traction, right? Like let's put it like this. If you have annual recurring revenue, it makes it very easy, or it makes it easier for you to raise. Now, the problem is this chicken and egg problem. You don't. So what else could you do? And that's why that's why how I summarize it best is any sort of customer love, any sort. Like I'm currently working with we're currently looking into a startup. They're super early. They just started, 3 co-founders. But right now we are in a motion of where we have a call like every 2 weeks, and they just compiled a Notion list, and they like every 2 weeks they're like, look, these are the 10 companies we speak to. This is the feedback we got. With these 2, we're gonna move on. From these 4, we learned X. That's why we're targeting more of this category. Let me guide you through. So it's like any sort of customer love. Like if you're super vague, like we're gonna sell this to the travel agent space because we built an AI agent for ticketing. Well, okay, but who? Like who did you talk to? So it doesn't mean that you need dollar revenues on your bank account. This would help. If you don't, LOIs, POCs, any terms of pilots. If you don't, conversations. If you don't, a short list of people who you might want to target. If you don't, well, I mean, then it's too early to raise.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question here. The 3 questions, I'll be short.
3.
Yeah.
Okay, 1. First one.
One, it's maybe about the credentials, or looking from there are some jokes nowadays, especially in the tech sides, that it's more important to get a PhD. Kind of, what's your view on that? And also, do you invest in people that have very strong credentials, or also there are cases where the credentials maybe are not that good, but the idea is more important?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that, because I actually think that we don't look at credentials in such a way at all, actually. So for us, it's really, we look at the team, we look at the person behind it. Like the person can have a university education, but that's not a requirement. The person can have a bachelor degree finished, a master's degree finished, a PhD finished. It's not a requirement at all. We would more look like into, hey, who are the founders? Like, what idea did they come up with? What team were they able to gather around them? Like, that's also like a little bit of the revert question of solo founders that we ask. If we have a solo founder pitching to us, we are asking ourselves the question, why did that person not convince a single other person to go on that road with them? Like, if the idea is so great, right? So for us, it really doesn't matter what credentials, if people studied or not, or from what university. It doesn't matter too much. Like, obviously you have, in terms of founder credentials, what you do have a bias to in the market is like second time co-founders, right? Like, let's say you have already founded something and had a successful exit, and then go out and raise again. Your chances of raising are higher because you will have already a network, you will have a name, you will have a, oh, success check, this founder has already done it before, everyone will want to invest in your company. But it's not a requirement at all. Like we invest primarily in solo founders because in first-time founders because we invest so early. Some have a bachelor's degree, some have a PhD.
Yeah, okay, I see. Thank you. Second, we were speaking with Melanie about it. It's about how you get, and I was said that I should ask you, so I'm asking now. How you get in contact with the VCs? We were speaking exactly about hot intros, that maybe is the best option, but then it's also this, let's say, trade-off between like I just cannot ask Melanie if I don't know her, though. Hey, can you introduce me? So we have to have some relationship sort. Yeah. Versus also maybe you don't have the relationship, but maybe you just meet one time and you have the belief in the idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really good question. Like, how do you build your shortlist of people like you actually want to talk to? And so the best way is always, as Melanie said, a warm intro. So the best intros we get is from founders that we invested in our portfolio. Like, I don't know, Faja, the founder of Oxeye, saying, hey, I met this founder in that space, really cool tech, you should speak to them. So then we're like, okay, call tomorrow. Or if it's like someone in our network, like someone we know that says, hey, met this person, cool tech, I'm thinking of doing an angel ticket, you should also have a look. But that's the best case. The worst case is, well, I think the worst case is someone not talking at all to us. So, and then obviously the warmer you can get, the better, but it's not a requirement because, I mean, at some point you have to start and you start at zero, right? Because you don't know people. So how that's why I said it's really about investing time in building human relationships. Like how I did it in Berlin when I was a founder is I started to go to events. Many VCs or ecosystems, like I don't know, ETH AI Center does a lot of events, like where they bring investors together, founders pitch, people stand around afterwards, even for 5 minutes. Go to that person and say, hey, you know, I'm XYZ, I'm building this, don't want to bother you right now. Do you have 15 minutes to speak to me next week? And probably if it's an investor, they will say yes. If you cannot attend events because the investor is in a different geography or you just can't be there, then just try to, if you send someone a cold message, and we get a lot of cold messages, and many funds get cold messages where they just invest in, just be more specific. So for instance, one other fund told me a story about, there's a Zurich startup that raised, they're called Carbon Pool, and Revent did the round. It's a very cool fund based in Berlin that only invests in climate and clean tech. And Carbon Pool is also like a company in that space. Now, the partner of Revent also tells me like this is the first and only deal they did so far with a complete cold inbound message, like someone writing to hello at kind of address, like from Carbon Pool about this. Now, how did they convince them? It's like until they went to investment, it was a very tailored message. It was like, hey, what you do at Revent fits exactly what we do to our values we have at Carbon Pool, and this is why, 1, 2, 3. Would you have time to jump on a call? 15 minutes. Here's our short deck. Now we all go back to the preparation. Not a 30-page research paper, a short and crisp deck, because everyone just quickly, always start with your team slide. Some people put the team slide at the very end. Start with your team slide. And then, you know, people will react. We get messages like in a kind of like completely weird format, dear sir or madam. I never reply. Probably same for you. I'm sure, for instance, Melanie now, I'm sure gets bombarded on LinkedIn with people that say, hey, can you make me an intro too, without knowing that person? Or I saw you doing angel investments, like, do you want to invest? Or do you have 30 minutes for a coffee? Obviously not, because your time is like very, like you have 24 hours a day. So probably if someone writes you very personally, short, makes it worthwhile for you, it increases your chances to replying.
Yeah, I see. Take a third one if you agree or not. Maybe.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So it's about maybe I'm coming from a technical background, and sometimes when we speak about pre-seed startups, then the market for me and the market, just talking about the market in general seems a little bit vague to me, or how do you say, not that interesting in the sense of, as you said, I'm starting a company now, I have so many other priorities, and then someone comes and we say, oh, in 2030 we should make 45 million, you know? For me, it's a lot of luck and a lot of different factors that encompasses this journey, and I don't see it's maybe an open question where I don't see how exactly maybe the market falls down for me, the priorities a little bit below. It's like maybe a future potential goal where we have to be, but it's only like a vague, let's calculate whether people.
So your question is, how do you
think about?
How do you explain to someone how do you put together your 5-year plan?
Yeah.
Or sorry, can you rephrase the question?
It's more about how important is even the market size in the pre-seed phase.
Yeah,
besides the fact that there should be money in it. But
yeah, it's a very good question, and it's also like, obviously you look into a crystal ball, right? Like you don't know the answer. Like a gazillion things could happen. The market could break down. Like I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Like you don't know, right? But it's basically what people are looking for is they're looking for a tiny bit of your rationale, how you think about the market, or like how you think about the problem you're solving and who you're solving this for and how big this can get and how big you want to get. So it's not really about that you have like a concrete, like super diligent, like blah, blah, blah number together, but it's a little bit of a back of the envelope question that you should have an answer to make someone not in your world understand how important it is what you're doing. So I don't know, like if we look into, we invested in Depoly, they're building the deep tech startup, plastic recycling. The global plastic recycling market is huge. Now, at some point, they just came up with a number. I don't know, at some study, blah, 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 and we just put this number on a pitch deck. And no one really questions, okay, bottom up, how did you come up with that? But obviously it should not be invented. But it just shows like that you understand and that you thought about, hey, how big is this problem actually that I'm solving? And everyone knows a gazillion things can go wrong. Like also founders ask me, how should I do a 5-year financial plan? I have no idea where I'm in 5 years. It depends. Depends on how much I raise, depends on how much customers I have, depends on. Yes, everyone knows that. But in your ideal world, because people want to see your conviction and back your conviction, in your world, like if you're raising, like you will close that round. In your world, like if you're solving a big problem, you will build the category defining company in that space. If then a founder is like, yeah, I mean, I'm raising now, but I'm not sure if I will raise. Yeah, like I'm building in that space, but I'm not sure if, like, that really again decreases. Like if you don't have conviction about the space, no one will back you. And it doesn't mean like you need to build a $1 billion company, but it depends on if you talk to a certain type of people, then you have to have a bigger conviction. Like if you want to talk to Sequoia Index and VC funds, like you want to build a big company. If not, like it's really not the right fit to talk to them. And I'm not saying VC is the only and best way, but I'm saying if you go the VC route, you want to have the conviction that you are going to raise, you are going to build the category defining company in your space, and this is why. And people want to back, like at least someone that believes in themselves. So come up with a little bit back of the envelope, like make it, like a little bit of like how you right now, it's your best guess of how the future might look like. Everyone knows it will change, but this is how you see the world right now. And also I thought about one more thing when you said intros. What's very good, and what also, for instance, helped me then in fundraising, but what I see now with founders, let's say they're in a space, education, right? And they're raising a round, and then they say, hey, by the way, we already have one angel investor committed, and it's someone that has already successfully built something in the edtech space. right? It makes someone more general, more convinced that, oh, this is really cool. Example, if you're in the edtech space and you have Severin Hacker, the CTO of Duolingo, which is like, he's Swiss, he studied at ETH, and he built a company that has a market cap of over 8 billion, then if you had a chat with him and convinced him, maybe he's an angel, maybe he is an advisor, maybe he gives you some good reference, it just increases. If you build in the food tech space and you have someone from Planted that's like, hey, that's super cool, again, it could increase. Now it's super hard because where are these people, la la la, maybe they're even your competitors, you don't even want them. But when I got Johannes Reck to advise me, and he didn't invest in the beginning, it helped me because he had a good reputation of from other VCs. And then he maybe at some point invested, but he was advising me first. If you have Melanie on your side and she thinks, hey, you know, maybe I'm not doing an angel ticket, but like I started to work with that founder, super responsive, like really great energy, like they're, you know, they're onto something, it's good. So it increases again. Yeah.
So now last question.
Yeah.
Because I know you will also need to run off. But
yeah.
So thank you for covering 4 of the 5 these so well. I have a question about the terms and conditions in the small text. What should be what should we as a founder should pay attention, and how should we protect ourselves, especially when we, for example, don't have the funds now to hire expensive lawyers, and what's the small text world?
Yeah, very good. So how I would think about this as a founder, my biggest learning is there's nothing more expensive than a cheap lawyer. So if you work with someone, for instance, on the legal side, like just get one of the 3 main law firms in Switzerland. I mean, like Kellerhals or Wenger Vierli, or, you know, there are also a couple of others now. I'm not just saying them too, but also when we talk to a founder team and we say, hey, who do you work with on the legal side? And they say, oh, my uncle in the Bahamas, or, you know, Kellerhals, it's a little bit of a difference. And at the end of the day, you pay for legal services anyways. So work with someone that has already worked with startups. And these couple of law firms that I just mentioned, they also have like startup and scale-up programs. So for instance, I worked at some point with a lawyer in Berlin. He was the main startup guy. And they have really founder-friendly conditions where you don't pay anything until you raise your first round. And then it's okay to pay, right? Because you have money on your bank account, and you also should spend it if you get good work. There are a lot of other programs from InnoSwiss where you have really cool lawyers that pro bono work with startups, and you can ask questions. Now, how do you think about terms as a founder? So I would think about it always that way. Cap table, keep it clean, right? Only put fully operational team members on your cap table. Second, now it's okay to have some profs, but if you have profs because you are deep tech and so on, like never like in a 2-digit sphere, like always get them down to below 10%. Second, if you raise a round, think about dilution. It's very hard to come up with a valuation, right? And if a VC asks you, what's your valuation? It's a little bit of a stupid question because every VC knows that ideally per financing round, think about this as a founder, you don't want to dilute more than 20 to 25% per round. So this again gives you then a valuation, right? Because then you can engineer a little bit backwards. Now, of course, now how can you increase this valuation? Of course, founders that are second-time founders have already successfully, someone that has already had a 500 million exit, now founds again, they can have a much higher valuation. Or if you already have a team besides you where you say, hey, these 5 people from NVIDIA are going to join me tomorrow, the best data scientists or engineers, I just need the money, you can have a higher valuation. If you have already ARR, which you won't have, you can have a higher valuation. If you have 3 customer LOIs from quality logos where you say, hey, if I just have this money, I can get them, higher valuation. If you don't have all of that, think in general, rule of thumb, you don't want to dilute more than 20 to 25%. You can dilute less if you have more of the other things I just mentioned. Now, how else to think about valuation? As you raise more funding rounds, obviously you want to increase your valuation. So think about it that with the next round, you always want to make your next pre 2 times your post, right? So let's say you raise at a post of 10 million, then you want your next pre money valuation to be 20 million. So you double your post for your next pre. Now you can also, ideally you don't have a flat round until your next round, and ideally you don't have a down round. It's not too bad if at some point you do, because maybe the market requires and it's better to survive than not to survive at all. However, this is how you can also financial model it a bit, right? Like you raise now, think about how much to raise. You want to raise a sum that makes it possible for you to achieve your next milestone. You don't want to raise too much because then you dilute more. You don't want to raise too little because you don't want to raise again in 12 months, because a good fundraising process still takes 6 months, 3 to 6, until the money is on your bank account. So you want to raise, think of it as the ideal case would be 24 months money on your bank account, where in 18 months you can go out again with the milestones you've reached. In 18 months to raise in a very good fundraising process, 3 to 6 months, your next round. This is the amount you raise, the valuation. Calculated backwards, you don't want to dilute more than 20 to 25%. And the next round, think about, you want to double your post. So that's why the highest valuation is not always the best. If someone comes in now and gives you a check with a 50 million valuation, you could think, oh, amazing, this is my lucky day. However, in 18 months, you have to go out again and then raise on 100 million valuation because you want to double. Now, can you achieve that? Can you raise at 100 million? If the answer is yes, go for it. If the answer is no, what happens in 18 months is that you will raise at a flat round or at a down round. Your valuation is either same or lower. Now you lose all the tier 1 funds and you're basically out of the game. Very, very quickly. Like it goes super quickly. So it's always this fine line between high valuation, great, but you have to deliver by doubling it. And that's really hard. If you now think, okay, you raise on a 5 million valuation, next round 10 million. What justifies 10 million? Is it your annual revenue? Then you just can apply an annual ARR multiple. But probably it's not, because you won't have annual revenue until your next round. So what is it? Is it the quality of logos? Okay, if you can deliver, yes. Is it, did you hire the best engineers from the current, the most hottest company on the market? Did you hire the COO of your biggest competitor and convince this person to join you? What did you do? And what VCs look at is, if we look now at the next round, because when we invest, our thesis is, can we work with the team for 18 months to raise on a double valuation? And then we look again at exactly these things. Team, now you raise your first round on the co-founders. The second round you raise on the people you've attracted the last 18 months. Now with Oxide, I hired the CEO of Climeworks. It was a great move for their business because everyone was like, wow, the CEO of Climeworks that worked there for 12 years now joined an 8-people team in Schlieren. Why? Tech, did you innovate? Like, what did you have? How many product improvements, iterations, did you have? TAM, what other quality logos did you add in the last 18 months? Traction, sorry, that's the same. Those 3 things, nothing more. Because every investor asks, when we do now, it works with reference calls, right? Like if we have a company now that's raising because we invested in the last round, the new investors that show a slight interest will call me and say, this company, tell me the 3 things they did in the last 12 months. And they want to hear headlines, like not, oh, like they built MVP 2.0, no one cares. As long as you're not Apple or NVIDIA, no one cares about your product launch. Who did they hire and who did they win as customers? And that's how I would think about it.
Thank you very, 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 very much. I highly appreciate that you took the time because I know you are on the run to actually check out one of your portfolio startup.
Yeah.
I would say a huge round of applause for Antonia. And the gift will then come via a mail post because I couldn't take it with me.
It was really
Thank
nice
you very
to
much.
meet you all. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. And if you are building a startup or raising a round, at Founderful, we always say it's never too early to talk to us.
Exactly.
And with that, I welcome Isabel, who's
Perfect.
Gute Insights, danke.
So I'm handing over to Isabel and we'll like go with Antonia, but
Do we need a break?
yeah, maybe do a 5-minute break and then you can install yourself.